see you again. This is the second episode of my Fab Arts podcast where I'm talking about what I've been making in knitting and crocheting and whatever else I come up with in the future. I have some finished objects to share, some works in progress, actually lots of works in progress, and some plans for the next few weeks, and let's get to it. So the first item I would like to chat about is my seabreeze sweater. This is a self-drafted raglan sweater that I mainly based off of the step-by-step sweater pattern by Florence Miller and off the video tutorial on how to knit a raglan sweater by Kate Beats. And I already spoke about this as a finished object in my last episode, but as I explained back then, I wasn't entirely happy with the outcome and I did go back and do some sweater surgery, so it is finished once again. I knit this in Drops Melody and I used two each of the colors marzipan, light sea green, light blue and dark jeans blue, I believe. And it is a alpaca and wool mix with a polyamide thread in the middle, so it's very fluffy and gives it that breezy look that inspired the name. I used 6mm needles for the stockinette part, and then for the neck opening and for the body hem I used a 4.5mm needle, and for the cuff I actually used a 4mm needle, which was quite a big step down from the 6mm needle, but I had a tiny little circular needle with 4mm laying around and I didn't want to do magic loop, so I just decided on that and it actually worked out fine in the end. So I had two reasons why I was previously not entirely happy with the sweater I had made. The first one was that I knitted it a little bit too short, so I was kind of afraid it would grow when I blocked it. So I knitted it shorter than I would have liked it in anticipation of that, and then I blocked it and nothing happened. It didn't get bigger at all, which I'm attributing to the polyamide in the yarn, so I'm guessing it just doesn't like block bigger. However, that meant that the sweater looked a bit smaller than I would have liked it to be. The body was just very cropped and the sleeves kind of hit at this like bracelet length, which it was kind of fine, but also since both the body and the sleeves were so short, to me it looked a little bit like I had just knitted a size too small. So I decided to go back and fix these issues. And also I had tried to do an Italian binder for 2x2 ribbing, and I guess I did something wrong, or the tutorial I looked at just didn't really work, but the ribbing or the bind off for the ribbing wasn't stretchy at all. So it kind of cut into my body and it just looked very tight and uncomfy. So that were the two problems I had when I last spoke about this sweater. Usually when you do sweater surgery, what you do is you cut the ribbing off of the sweater and then add some length to it, and then you can sew the ribbing back on with a Kitchener stitch. However, since I wasn't happy with my bind off either, I didn't want to do that. So the other option would have been to just unravel the ribbing, but the problem with that was that the yarn that I used like tangled together so easily when I was knitting it in ribbing. It was fine for the stockinette part, I could like frock that back if I needed to, but the ribbing just got so tangled up in each other that it wasn't possible for me to frock it. So I decided, since I had so much yarn left over, to just cut off the ribbing and re-knit it entirely. So it was a bit scary. I had to cut my finished object, but it all turned out fine in the end. So I cut off the ribbing. I added about 7 centimeters in length to both the sleeves and the body, which was actually quite a lot. And then I re-knitted the hem and the cuffs, and in the end I did a different kind of bind off. I found a tutorial by Norman from Nimble Needles that worked very well. It's not an Italian bind off, but it's still very stretchy, so I would recommend it if you're too lazy to do Italian bind off. And originally I intended to also make a split hem while I was going back to do all of these changes, because I kind of thought that the sweater looked a little more sporty than I would have wanted it to look. and I was kind of thinking if I could do a split hem, I could kind of elevate the look a little bit, make it a bit more formal, a bit more, I don't know, work appropriate from a fit perspective. And I did do that, but I decided to close it up again. So for the sweater, I feel like the body has a little bit less positive ease than the sleeves do. And that is something I could have fixed when separating for sleeves. I could have cast on like extra stitches under the underarm, but I didn't realize at the time. And it's not necessarily a big problem. It's not incredibly unproportional to the point where you would realize when you look at the sweater. But when I did the split hem, that kind of meant that the body of the sweater was just hanging down instead of like being tight to my, or not tight, but like laying on my body. So I felt like the weight of the hem was pulling the entire sweater like down a little bit, which made the body look even slimmer compared to the sleeves, and I just didn't really like the way that looked. So when I was done, I decided to sew up the sides where I had done the split. So now the hem just looks like a normal hem, like I originally intended it to look. In general, I would say I'm very happy with the way this sweater turned out now. It fits a lot better for my liking, it feels a lot cozier to wear it, and the sleeves now hit me like mid-hand, where I originally wanted them to be. But because I sized down my needle size so much for the ribbing, it's still possible to roll up the sleeve and it kind of stays up on my arm, which I enjoy a lot because that means that when I have the sleeves down, I can have this like cozy look where I can hide your hand in your sleeve. But if I need to do something, I don't know, wash dishes or do whatever, I can still roll up my sleeves and not have them hang in my food or in the water or whatever. So I actually think that turned out really well. For the body hem, it now just fits as I planned it to fit in the beginning. I will say that it is kind of visible where I sewed the split hem I knitted together, but it doesn't really bother me because I kind of flip the hem inside out on me when I wear it, so it's not visible from the outside. And I don't know, I think even if I were to not flip it inside out, you kind of have to be very close to the sweater to see any sort of issue there, so that doesn't really bother me. Another thing I'm not entirely happy with is my yarn choice, I guess. I think it looks really cool, but it is a bit itchy for me, especially around my neck. So if I were to use this again for a sweater, I would choose a fit that doesn't come quite as high up here. And that also means that I kind of have to wear something underneath, or like a long sleeve underneath to kind of, I don't know, cover everything up and not feel itchy after a while. And since the sweater is already made out of alpaca and wool, and then I have to wear something underneath, it just gets very warm. And where I live, I just don't need a lot of very warm sweaters. It does get like cool in the winter, but it's not so cold that I would actually have to wear such a warm sweater for any significant portion of the year, especially since it's a knitted sweater and I'm not gonna, I don't know, go for a run in it. So I spend most of my time while I wear this indoors, and it just, if it's like a heated room, it's just a bit too warm for me. But regardless, I think there's instances where I would put this on, especially if I haven't slept enough. I get so cold on the days after I haven't slept enough, I don't know, but I could really imagine myself wearing it in the winter if I had like bad sleep and I just want something warm and cozy to cuddle up in. And I also think it looks really cool. It's like a statement piece without being, I don't know, completely attention-seeking. And it works really well in my wardrobe with the other items that I have. So I have worn this a couple of times, I've taken some pictures in it, and I really enjoy the sweater now. I'm happy that I went back on it and fixed the issues I had, but that's everything about my finally finished sea breeze sweater. My second finished object is this Sophie scarf. It's a pattern by Petite knit, as most of you probably know. And I knitted this in Cardiff Cashmere Classic and the color Iris, I don't know how to pronounce it. The number is 671. It is one of the recommended yarns for the pattern. I, however, did not knit it in the recommended needle size, and the reason for that is kind of complicated. This was kind of a spontaneous idea because I wanted to make this as a gift knit, and I had never knit with cashmere before either, so I got 2 balls of the cashmere yarn, and my intent was to make the Sophie scarf and then make an item for myself. I was looking at some fingerless gloves, so that would have been the ideal option. However, I was kind of afraid I wouldn't have enough yarn left over for the gloves, so I did some swatching and I decided to go up in needle size to 4.5mm needle. That is still recommended for this yarn, so I thought it would be fine, and it is. I wasn't trying to make like the warmest scarf ever. Yeah, but I was kind of hoping by going up to a 4.5mm needle that I could get the Sophie scarf out of one skein of the kind of cashmere and then use the other skein for myself. However, let's just say I have 19 grams left over for my gloves that are probably not going to be gloves anymore. Yeah, about the pattern really quickly, I think this has been covered more than enough by other people, but it's a very easy to follow pattern that's very beginner friendly as well. You knit some increases and then you knit a straight section in the middle and then you knit some decreases. I knitted this twice now, but I knitted it off gauge both times, so I can't really speak for how long it takes if you use the 3mm needle, but I used 4.5 both times, and I think the first one took me like an entire day of me just having, I don't know, nothing to do and sitting down and just doing a scarf. This one I took some more time because, I don't know, I didn't have a tight deadline or anything. So I have 3 small problems with this. The first one is kind of a cosmetic one, and that is that I found that the lighter yarn shows where the increases are a little bit. So if you kind of know a bit about knitting and you look at it up close, you can see the spots where I increased. It's not a big problem, but I just wasn't aware it would be visible because the other Sophie scarf I've knitted on in a darker color, so I didn't see the increases there at all. And here you can kind of, I don't know how visible it is like this, but I will put a picture. But yeah, you can kind of see where I did the increases. The other problem is a bit like the fabric it created, which is entirely my fault because I knitted it off gauge. The other Sophie scarf I have is a lot more structural and stiff, and I was kind of hoping to get that same result, but the cashmere yarn is just a lot softer and stretchier, so it is a bit more floppy, I guess. Like if you put this on your neck, it kind of, I don't know, it folds down. It doesn't, like the other one I have, just stays up like this. So that's a little bit impractical because I feel like even though the other one is a colder yarn technically, it keeps me warmer because it doesn't fall down on my neck. It's also, I think I made this a bit too long considering how stretchy the yarn is. Like as you can see, it stretches quite a bit, which is normal for garter stitch, but the other scarf I made isn't as stretchy. So I guess I didn't really consider that me using a different yarn would impact the fabric like that before I started. So if I were to go back, I would make it a little bit shorter, and I would probably also not size up my needle quite as much. The third problem I have is the yarn consumption, as I mentioned in the beginning. Since I knit both of my Sophie scarves off gauge, I kind of abandoned the pattern a little bit and just did my own thing. So I'm guessing this is a good amount longer than what the pattern calls for, and also maybe a little bit wider in the middle. So I used up a lot more yarn for this than I intended. And that means that I only have like 19 grams left over right now to make a project for myself. So it's not gonna be fingerless gloves, although I do still want some, and also want some in a light neutral, but I'm guessing I will have to wait for some other leftovers to do that. So I think most likely I will make a small headband with it. I've kind of wanted one for a while, just like a basic one that is very thin, not like a thicker winter one, but one I can kind of use to hold my hair back, because I'm trying to grow out my hair, but right now it has kind of an awkward length where it doesn't stay in hairstyles very well. It's not long enough to do a ponytail, and any hairstyle I do with my hair pulled back, I have to put lots of like bobby pins and clips on it for it to stay. But I still want it out of my face sometimes because it is long enough to annoy me. So I thought maybe I could make like a small headband and use that to just pull back my hair for the next few spring months. I think that would look quite nice. So that's my new plan, and I'm hoping I will have enough yarn for it, but I think I should be fine. Moving on to my works in progress, this is my Maybe Forever sweater by Veronika Lindberg from her book Knit This, and at least that's what I'm calling it right now. I don't know, I would kind of like to come up with different names from the pattern name for my items, like in Ravelry when you can put in what you're naming your project and then also put in the pattern name. That would be kind of cool, but I have a hard time coming up with names for them. Anyways, it's an all-over brioche sweater, and brioche is a texture that's created by slipping a stitch and pairing it with the yarn over, and then knitting the next stitch together with the yarn over from the previous round, and in the next round you purl all of the stitches you slipped and slip all of the stitches you knit in the last round. So I'm hoping that kind of explains it, but this is not a tutorial. This is made using Drops Air, which is the recommended yarn, and I got it in the color Acorn. It is a chain net yarn, so there's like a chain net, as the name says, in the middle of the yarn, and it has some alpaca and wool fibers in it. And it's really cool because it's very lightweight, but still very fluffy. And you use 5mm needles for the body or the brioche parts, and 4mm needles for all of the ribbing, which is also the recommended needle size, but I happened to meet gauge exactly with that needle size, so that's also what I'm using. As you can see, I made quite a bit of progress on this, so this is all from the last month. However, I don't know, I knitted on this mainly. This was like my main big project, and it was fun to do, but I had some issues with the pattern's clarity, I guess. There was some back and forth involved where I've knitted a section and then realized I had misunderstood what the pattern meant and then went back. And I don't know if that's always necessarily the pattern's fault or if that's just me, like, I don't know, overthinking or interpreting too much. I don't know. Maybe this is like a normal amount of clarity for patterns. I honestly haven't knitted to pattern that much, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a baby. But I guess I'm gonna explain what I mean. For example, the first problem I ran into was the increases in the yoke. So when you knit a raglan sweater, you do like make one lefts and make one rights at each of the raglan seams to get the yoke to get bigger. And I wasn't sure how to incorporate those make one rights and make one lefts into the brioche texture. So sometimes you would, like, I don't know, make one left and then you would be supposed to knit that stitch to stay in the texture, but sometimes that stitch would also be a slip-on yarn over. And then I wasn't really sure if I was supposed to just knit it and then incorporate it into the brioche in the next round, or if I was supposed to slip it and treat it as if it was already part of the pattern. I guess probably the first one, because that's like the definition of a make one left or make one right, that you get the bar in the needle and then you knit it. Or you purl it, depending on which row you're on. But I kind of was unsure about that, and I thought she would probably explain that in the technique section in the beginning of the book, where she also explains how to do decreases in brioche. So I assumed there would be an explanation for increases in brioche, but there wasn't. So I don't know, maybe I completely overthought this issue and I was just supposed to knit the stitch and then worry about it in the next round. But yeah, I decided to just incorporate it into the pattern immediately because I unfortunately ran into this issue when I was traveling and I didn't have the book with me, but I did have a picture of the pattern. However, I didn't have a picture of the beginning of the book where she explained all of the techniques. So I just kind of assumed, and then when I came home and saw that there was no explanation on it anyways, I just kind of ran with what I had already tried. The next little thing I had a little bit of a problem with was that at first, for the first couple of increases, she writes out every round and how to do the increases there. And then there's like a little part where she's just like, okay, just continue in pattern and increase on every, I don't know what increment round, which is fairly normal for patterns. But at first, when the increases are written out, very clearly all of the increases are made on knit rounds, while suddenly in the part that you're just supposed to figure out by yourself, there's also increases in the purl rounds, which is not a problem per se. It just confused me because it like says, oh, just continue like you've been doing it. And then I don't know, I sat there for like 20 minutes writing down all of the rows because I was confused about how that was supposed to work. And then I realized I was probably just supposed to do increases on the purl rounds now, which, as I said, it wasn't like a problem to make it this way, but if there had been like half a sentence of, oh, now from now on the increase rounds will be a knit and then a purl round and then a knit round again, I don't know, I feel like that would have eased some of my confusion. Another problem I ran into was with the stitches you're supposed to cast on the underarm after separating for sleeves. So you separate and then you always cast on extra stitches to make the body a little bit wider, and you cast them on using the backwards loop method, and then it just says to incorporate them into the brioche texture in the next round. And I don't know, maybe this is common sense, but I was obviously like alternating between a slip-on yarn over and then a knit two together for the brioche. So when I got to the newly cast on stitches, I also knit two together, and then I realized my stitch count was off and that I was just supposed to knit an individual stitch and not knit two together, which, as I said, maybe if you knit brioche a lot, or I don't know, you're very experienced and you totally know what you're doing, you're aware that that was not what you're supposed to do. But for me, it was just a little confusing, and I would have been happy about, again, one extra sentence that would have explained that. And then for a short while I also forgot how to do brioche in the round because I got confused about the fact that there was the same kind of stitch next to each other at the beginning of round where you switch from knitting to purling or from purling to knitting. So for a while I was, I don't know, confused what was happening to my piece and tried to figure out where I'd made a mistake, which I guess this is really common knowledge. I had done brioche before, but I had forgotten, apparently. I like didn't remember, and I thought something was wrong for a while. Yeah, but all of these were like small little issues that I had where I thought, okay, like it's not necessarily the pattern's fault that this is not explained better, but also it wouldn't have been that much trouble to explain it in a way where I would have understood immediately. I feel like I don't publish patterns necessarily, but when I self-draft, I usually write down my pattern by the end. Like I take notes on my tablet and like write down everything I do, and when I'm done with the piece, I'll go back and like write down an actual pattern. So all of these are issues where I would have thought, okay, if I was writing the pattern, I would include these. Maybe I'm just giving too much information, or I don't know, I just like to make things extra clear, and some people prioritize that the pattern isn't too long, for example, when they're writing a pattern to avoid confusion there. but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily blame the pattern for all of these issues, but as I said, I would have sometimes preferred a little more clarity in it. There's one issue though that I'm definitely blaming on the pattern, and that is the sizing. When I knitted the yoke and tried it on, I was very happy with the way it fit. And then I was supposed to cast on stitches under the arms, and it's actually a crazy amount of stitches that you're supposed to cast on. I don't think I've ever seen another sweater pattern where you're supposed to cast on that many stitches. So you're adding, I think, about 16 centimeters in circumference for the body under the arms, which is quite a lot, and which was way too much for me. I'm knitting the smallest size in this, which is an extra small to small, which is already very unusual. I haven't knit a pattern by Veronika Lindberg before, so I don't know how I usually fall into her size range. But I don't know, when I buy clothes at the store or when I knit patterns from other designers, I usually opt to go for like a medium or a large even, because I do like most of my clothes to be a little oversized. So it is very unusual that I'm knitting the smallest size, and even the smallest size was that much too large for me, even though, you know, I'm not usually the smallest size. So I don't know, I felt like that was a bit weird. I also looked at some other people's sweaters on Instagram, and I found that a lot of the pictures to me looked like there was a lot of space under the underarm here, where it would be like hanging down to here, which like I don't know, I don't think that's supposed to be like that. It's kind of hard to tell, I must say, because I think there's only one picture on Ravelry of the sweater. That's just like the front where she's holding something as well, so you can't really see what's going on under the arms. And in the book there's one more picture from behind, like showing the back a little bit, but you can't really see a lot of the sweater, to be honest. So I don't know how it fits on her, but I felt like that was a really weird part of the pattern. So what I did was I frog back and I decided to only cast on 3 stitches under each arm, and that way I was able to continue the brioche texture but without yet gaining so much circumference in the body, and also like making the armhole a little bit smaller for later for doing the arms. So far, with the way the sweater looks right now, I don't have any complaints about it. The only thing I'm a bit worried about is the durability. I have used Drops Air before for accessories, so I have some hats and stuff in Drops Air, which is probably also not like the most common yarn choice, but I don't know, I really like them because they're quite lightweight but still warm, but I don't know, without being itchy. So it's kind of cool. And I think the hats I have in Drops Air are crocheted, so that I never really had a problem with those, but I have like a small scarf that I knitted in Drops Air in ribbing, and I feel like every time I wash it, it keeps growing a little bit. So that's like the only thing I'm unsure about with this sweater. I'm a bit worried it will grow with washing, like every time I wash it, not just with like hanging down, but I guess I'll see about that. Other than that, I'm really happy with the fit of the sweater now that I've fixed the issue with the armholes. I'm really happy with the color I chose, and I'm really happy with the yarn as well, because as I said earlier, I don't really need a lot of very warm sweaters, and this is, while it is still an alpaca and wool fiber, it is very lightweight and breathable, and it lets a lot of air through, so I think this won't be too warm for me, and also since it's such a soft yarn that's not itchy at all, I won't necessarily need to wear anything underneath. So yeah, that's my progress so far. I think I'll finish the second sleeves in the next couple of days, and then maybe I still have like a cold day coming where I can put this on. The next work in progress I would like to chat about is this little doily I started making like 2 days ago. I think if I hold it in front of something dark, you can kind of see what it's going to be already. So this is a filet crochet doily, and I got the pattern from this magazine. I think I mentioned in my last episode that my grandma recently gifted me her old knitting and crocheting supplies. Lots of needles and lots of this crochet thread, but also some of these old magazines that kind of have some patterns for dishcloths and doilies and stuff like that in them. And I don't know, I recently, like this week, I thought it would be cool to make something for her using like the supplies that she gifted me. And I was looking through these magazines and I found this pattern, which I was immediately struck by because everybody's doing filet crochet right now and it looks really cool. So I thought this might be a fun thing to try. So I have fun while making it and I have something cool to give to my grandma. So for the yarn, I'm using this unlabeled crochet thread that came from my grandma. So unfortunately I can't tell you where this is from, but it's white crochet thread. I think you'll be able to find some if you need it. I'm using a 2.5mm needle, so I'm excited to see how big this turns out in the end. I don't really care about how big it's gonna be, but the pattern says it's supposed to be 64 centimeters in diameter. However, they're using a smaller thread, I guess, so it's the thread that they're recommending is 500 meters long per 50 grams, which is quite long. I don't know how long this one is because, as I said, no tag on it, but they're also using a 0.75 to 1mm needle, while I'm using 2.5. So I'm guessing I'm gonna have a quite a big doily in the end, but whatever, we're running with it. So far, I've really enjoyed making this. It's a very satisfying piece to make, and it's surprisingly easy. Filet crochet didn't seem hard necessarily to me, but it looks so intricate, so I kind of assumed it would be more complicated or fiddly. So filet crochet is a technique where you create little boxes and then you leave some of the boxes empty and you fill some of the boxes. These would be examples of empty boxes and these would be examples of full boxes. And you do that by doing double crochets and then chains for the empty boxes or just double crochets for the full boxes. And it has this color work type of effect where you get a pattern, but like inside of your object, but without color. I mean, you can add color if you want to, but I'm not. And for this piece specifically, you just make a giant granny square essentially. So there are these side stitches where you have the boxes, and then there's like an edge stitch that's very easy to make. And then you just repeat this for all of the other sides until you at the beginning of round again, and then you have to check the little chart that comes with it to see which boxes you're supposed to fill in the next round. And then in the end, I think you add on the tips of the little triangles just by crocheting back and forth. So these, like you would crochet until here, and then you would add this triangle on later. So far, as I said, it's relatively easy, even though I've ran into a few problems. First of all, I have crocheted for a while now, but I've never really used written patterns very much. I just kind of followed video tutorials or I self-drafted. I honestly didn't know how to find patterns very well, so I didn't really look at them much. So this is kind of a new experience to me. I've followed some knitting patterns now, but for crochet it's kind of new for me still. Also, this magazine is in German, and I understand German, but I learned how to knit and how to crochet in English because there was just more resources available in that language online. So I had to translate some of the terms of the crochet language, but I was able to figure it out fairly quickly. You mostly work to a chart, so that's very self-explanatory. Other than that, I kind of like, I was a lot further on this morning, but I had to frog back quite a bit because I realized I had made a mistake, and that kind of made me appreciate knitting a little more. I don't know, for the last few months I always thought that knitting was a little more complicated because you have so many live stitches, because I crocheted before I knitted, and for crocheting you only ever have like one live stitch really. But that also means that in knitting you can like go back vertically. So if you're like here and you realize you made a mistake here, you can just unravel the stitch and then fix it in this direction. While if you're crocheting and you realize you forgot a stitch here, there's really no way you can fix it unless you're frogging back. So I did that this morning. It was very fun. It was not fun. Yeah, but I'm hoping that I can continue making this without any major counting issues. And yeah, we'll see how long it takes me. I'm not really sure if I'm in a time crunch here, because it is working up relatively fast, but also it's getting bigger with every round, so I don't know yet when I'll be done with this. But needless to say, it's very fun for me to make, and even if I don't finish it until Easter, where I intended to give this to my grandma, I'll gift it to her some other time. So yeah, we'll see. So my next whip, I didn't make a lot of progress on, but I talked about this as a whip in the last episode already. This is a self-drafted mesh pullover that I kind of got inspired to make from an inspo pic I saw, I don't know, on Pinterest or something, where there was a person who was wearing a mesh knitted sweater over a button down. And I thought it looked really cool, and I thought it would be fun for that purpose, but also to wear in the summer as, I don't know, a little cover-up piece for tank tops or for a swimsuit. So I planned how to make this, and I casted it on, and I used more of my grandma's crochet thread because I have so much of it and I wanted to stash down on it a little bit because I don't use crochet thread very much usually. I made this using an 8mm needle, and the last time you saw it, I think it was just a giant square or a giant rectangle, which it mostly still is, but I did knit the shoulder parts shortly after filming my last episode, so now you could technically kind of use it as a back panel. I ran into one problem with it though, which I already anticipated. I think last time I said I wasn't sure if I was playing young chicken, because I couldn't really estimate how much of the crochet thread I would need. However, I rolled this into a different paper roll and weighed it and noticed that this is, I think, about half of what I needed for this. So it's not going to be enough to even make the front panel. I was already anticipating that I might have to make the sleeves from a different thread. I have some pinks and like rose colors that would be fitting, but I was kind of hoping I could at least get the front and the back panel from the red. So I cannot, and that's kind of where I stopped with this project because I got a little frustrated and I didn't know how to fix the issue. There's 3 things I could do. First of all, I could go buy more red crochet thread. This is unlabeled, so I don't know what exact brand or color or anything that was, but I guess I could just go to the yarn store with this and try to find the closest match, so that would work. But also I was kind of hoping to have less crochet thread in stash after this project, so I don't really feel, I don't know, like I want to buy more of it because I have a lot of white and I have a whole like 2-liter bag of colorful crochet thread and I don't want to add more to it. The other option would be to just do the front a different color and live with the fact that this piece will include a ton of different colors. But honestly, I don't think I would like the look of that very much. I would have been fine with the front and the back panel being one color and then the sleeves being a different matching color. But I think having all of the pieces be different colors is not something that I want to do. The other option, the third option, would be to frog this and then do the front and the back part in pink, because I have more pink than I have red, and use the red to make the sleeves because I think it should be enough for both sleeves. I think I'll come back to it in the section about my plans because I might have a 4th idea that will probably be the one I'm going with. So the other whip I was talking about in my last episode are these socks, which are made from the favorite sock pattern from Kristin, lehrer. I was already saying last time that I was kind of struck by second sock syndrome, and also that I don't enjoy knitting in magic loop very much, so as you can see, I made no progress on this. This has kind of become an abandoned whip. I don't know, a sock is apparently not enough motivation for me to go through all of the trouble of doing magic loop. I will finish this, but it will be on the back burner for a while. I think I'll use this for traveling. I just haven't traveled very much in the last few weeks and months, so I haven't really had much of a reason to pick this up, but it will be in a little bag laying around, and I will grab this and go whenever I need something quick and easy to fit in my bag. And considering that I haven't made any progress on these socks, it's not a big surprise that I have not cast on the smart heart socks I wanted to make from this sock yarn. I picked this up in Tallinn, where I visited over New Year's, and I previously lived in Tallinn for half a year, so I went back to my favorite yarn store and I got some sock yarn because I was kind of hoping to start a tradition of making a sock with yarn I got from everywhere I traveled. But yeah, as I said, I'm apparently not the biggest fan of knitting socks. I think I might start to enjoy it once I have more of the small circular needles, so I can just knit them in the round, because any kind of looping is just not for me, to be honest. And I could do it on double pointed needles, but honestly that doesn't seem too fun either, and I don't own any double pointed needles, so I would have to get like a ton of needles that I would also have to store somewhere. So I think if I'm getting new needles, I prefer to get the small circular ones. Yeah, but I actually have a different idea of what to do with this specific yarn. So this still gets used for something even if it's not becoming a sock. But I will tell you about this in my plans and acquisitions section. So I have quite a few plans that I don't know if all of them will come to fruition, but right now everybody's talking about summer knits and crocheting tops for warm weather and stuff like that, and I've also started thinking about it. And since I'm reconsidering some of my current whips anyways, I think I might do some readjusting. So my maybe plan would be to frog the mesh pullover, because as I said, it doesn't really work out with the red thread that I have anyways, and I'm thinking maybe I might use that red thread to make a filet crochet top, because I'm really enjoying doing filet crochet on the doily, and I would quite like to keep doing that and also have an item for myself with filet crochet. I'm not quite sure how that would look exactly. I haven't looked for patterns specifically or come up with anything myself, but I think it would be really cool, and I know that there are some pattern creators who specify in filet crochet or mainly have filet crochet patterns, and from what I've seen there's quite a few that I would enjoy wearing, so that thread might not become a mesh pullover after all. However, I still think the concept of the mesh pullover is quite cool, and since I'm not doing socks with this anyways, I was thinking maybe I could use this to make it. It is quite a thin yarn as well, and it has a little bit more structure than the crochet thread, which actually might be helpful for the mesh pullover, because it was kind of sagging down on itself a little bit. From how much weight the upper parts of the pullover would have to hold. So I think that might be a cool idea for this specific yarn. Also, I would say that I don't have a lot of things in this color. I have some things in blue, but not really in pink. So for a sock, I wouldn't really be sure what outfit to pair it with, while I think as a pullover, I can just throw it on with any kind of pants really. So it might even be put to better use like that. And depending on how much yarn the mesh pullover will use up, I might even have some left over of this. I have 2 skeins of it, so I could still make a small accessory to go with the pullover if I wanted to. I'm not making plans for that yet because I already once underestimated how much yarn I would need to make a mesh pullover. But yeah, that's the plan for now. I would still like to make the smart heart socks, even though I haven't been the biggest fan of sock knitting so far. But I've only ever tried one sock, and that the fact that it wasn't fun was really to no hold of the pattern at all. Like I really enjoyed the pattern and the video tutorial. It was just the magic loop thing, I think, that threw me off of it. Yeah, so I would still like to make the smart heart socks, but I was thinking maybe I would make them in a like bright red, or like maybe a darker red, some kind of shade of red, because I have some red items in my closet, but I don't have any red socks to go with them. So that would be kind of fun. And I'm also thinking about knitting color work summer top. It's more of an idea than a plan at the moment, so I'm not going to speak too much about it, but I would need red as a contrast color for that anyways. So I might get away with getting like 2 skeins of red yarn and then using them as a contrast color for my top, and also using them to make the smart heart socks. But I'm guessing maybe I will have more insight on that in the next episode. What I'm also gonna most likely be talking about in the next episode is a cardigan or jacket I'm gonna start making, because I ordered yarn to make the Esther jacket by Petite. I've had that in my Ravelry favorites for quite a while, probably since I started my Ravelry account. I don't know, I saw the picture and I was immediately very in love. I think it looks really cool. I don't really have any cardigans or jackets like that in my closet so far. It looks like a really fun item to just throw on over either short sleeve in evenings in like the spring or the autumn when it gets a little cold, or over like a thinner long sleeve in the winter. So I ordered some filcolana peruvian to make the Esther jacket out of. I'm gonna hope that that works out gauge wise, because it is not the recommended yarn. But I saw one other person in the Ravelry project who made the Esther jacket using filcolana peruvian held by itself. So I'm guessing it should kind of work out, because her pictures look really pretty. Yeah, but I'm gonna wait for that yarn to arrive, and right now I have some other priorities as well, because I really want to get my Maybe Forever sweater done. It's just a little bit of one sleeve left, so that should be very much possible. I need to get my doily done for Easter, I hope. So we're gonna see how that works out. And other than that, I don't know, I feel like I should calm down with the planning. I think since everybody's talking about summer knits and pattern recommendations for summer right now, I get into a bit of an over-planning spirit and have like 1,000 ideas, but not enough time to make everything, which is a little bit frustrating, but it'll be fine. I'm gonna figure something out, and if I don't make it this year, I might make it next year. So we'll see what I get to until the next month. I'm gonna say thank you for watching until the end now, and you can like and subscribe if you want to see more of this. You can definitely let me know if you have any kind of idea how you choose names for the objects that you're making. So you can write a comment about that or anything else you would like, and I'm gonna see you next time.